Alright, so today we have more details about Sony and how they are trying to influence the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Marvel Studios. Now, before when we talked about this, we were just talking about Sony interfering with Spider-Man 4. Sony wants Spider-Man 4 to be a big multiversal film, bigger than what we recently got for Spider-Man No Way Home, whereas Marvel Studios wants it to be a grounded film. And this is according to several different insiders, but the main one who first reported it being Daniel RPK, who has another report about this situation. But what's really interesting is it sounds like Sony is trying to take the plans that they once had for their own Sony live-action Spider-Man adjacent universe, whatever you want to call it, whatever plans they had for themselves for their own universe, it sounds like now they're trying to take those plans and make them happen in the MCU. Because here's the thing, since Madam Web came out, a lot of talk has been going on about what is Sony doing. And there was even a pretty big article that was done by The Hollywood Reporter about the state of Sony and their plans, with the title of this article being Inside Sony's Madam Web Collapse. Forget about a new franchise. With the subtitle, The Flop is wiping out an entire plan for a new movie series as the studio becomes the latest superhero studio in need of a pivot. And from what it sounds like, the pivot that Sony has in their mind is to simply do more things with Spider-Man and Spider-Man related characters inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, at first, this may sound like it's really bad, and I'm not saying that it won't be, but it does kind of have potential. This could potentially allow other Sony characters that are owned by them that we never thought we would see in the MCU to cross over into the MCU and possibly be done right. What that really is going to depend on is how much Sony is going to kind of interfere with Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios and the execs over there with the storylines that they have for these Spider-Man characters. But let's go into details about what this means and how it could specifically affect the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if you're new, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. This is also the last day of this month's giveaway. More about that at the end of the video. So a new report from Daniel RPK coming out yesterday when he tweeted, even after the multiverse saga ends, the Marvel multiverse won't. Sony is the reason, which is a very interesting statement because like I mentioned, this could be good or bad. Now, to start off, I don't think the multiverse is ever going to truly go away, even after the multiverse saga. It's very clear at this point in time when we get into the next saga after Avengers Secret Wars, after the soft reboot, some people are going to be in the new rebooted universe that were in the old one, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man is a perfect example of that. So unless Doctor Strange does another spell erasing everybody's memory in the new universes, everybody is still going to remember the multiverse and Avengers Secret Wars. So that means that the multiverse isn't going to go away. Marvel might have had a plan to not dive too much into the multiverse after the multiverse saga because after they want to take a step back and focus on their new teams like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, which makes sense. But the multiverse will still be there. The only thing that might change is how much they want to include that multiverse in their new plans moving forward. And that's where Sony kind of comes in, because that very well could be Marvel Studios' plan to not really mention the multiverse after the multiverse saga. We know it's there. Maybe something happens with it every now and then, but they keep focusing on grounded stories with the X-Men, Fantastic Four, and New Avengers. Unless Sony really wants to harness the power of the multiverse to bring their characters and possibly Tom Holland's Spider-Man or other Spider-Man characters like Miles Morales into their Sony universe, or to bring the characters from their Sony universe to the MCU. And this is why I mentioned this could be a good thing, but it also could be a bad thing. And it all ultimately is going to depend on how much Sony really wants to be involved. Because one thing is pretty clear at this point in time, whatever Sony had planned for their Spider-Man universe isn't really going to work. So Sony is really faced with a decision right now after Madam Web flopped. Do they continue to do what they do, knowing it will fail? Do they start over and try to come up with a new plan and essentially do a reboot of their own universe? Or do they get involved with the MCU more? Which would make sense to Sony, because if you take a look at what Marvel Studios has done with Spider-Man in the MCU, it's been way more successful than anything that they've done. And if they are truly smart about it, it could be a win-win-win. A win for Sony, a win for Marvel Studios and the MCU, and a win for us fans. Because if Sony kind of let Marvel Studios use some of these Spider-Man characters, not necessarily giving them the rights to these characters, but making a deal just like they did with Spider-Man, then we could get some epic characters in the MCU, like Venom, Spider-Gwen, Miles Morales. And what's interesting is it does seem like Sony might actually be going this route based off of the things that we've already heard about what their plans are. And we'll break down these plans in just a bit, but first, big thank you to Fume for sponsoring this video.
Honestly, I just sit here like all day and I just fidget with this. I turn it because it clicks, it goes in, like, all day when I'm recording, when I'm watching YouTube videos, whatever it is, I just fidget with this all day and I love it for some reason.
Fume is a game changer for a lot of people in turning bad habits into good habits. A lot of people struggle with these bad habits, but Fume looks at these in a different way. Not everything in the habit is wrong. So instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? And that's exactly what Fume does. They're innovative and they're award-winning and they're a flavored air device. That's all it is. It's flavored air. So it has none of the bad things and the bad habit in it. Instead of vapor, it uses flavored air. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses delicious flavors. I had actually heard really great things about Fume from my friends who were struggling with some bad habits. They actually raved about it and how it helped them, which is why I agreed to partner with them. And they sent me some samples and they honestly are super refreshing and taste very flavorful and good. And it comes in beautiful real wood. And it's honestly really fun to just sit there and kind of fidget with if you're someone who likes to fidget like I do. And I know stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but with Fume, it's easy. And they have served over 150,000 customers and have thousands of success stories.
So if you want help in kicking your addiction and you want to support the channel, you can head over to tryfume.com/cosmic for 10% off the journey pack. That's tryfume.com, tryfum.com, and use code COSMIC for 10% off the journey pack.
So if you didn't catch our video about it the other day, Sony has confirmed that a Miles Morales movie is happening. Amy Pascal herself from Sony said that the Miles Morales movie is happening, but they have to make Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse first and Spider-Man 4 first. Then recently this week, Daniel RPK, the insider, stated that Miles Morales will be introduced in Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland in the MCU, and the Miles Morales movie will be set in the MCU as well. This is great news because we get Miles Morales in the MCU, but it's also great news because it means that Sony is kind of thinking at least a little bit smart here. They're realizing that Miles Morales will be way more successful in the MCU than he would be in their own universe. And perhaps they're realizing that all of these characters in general will do way better in the MCU than they will in Sony's universe. That's the hope, at least, that Sony is kind of realizing this now. Because I said this before and I'll say it again, if Sony simply let Marvel Studios use these characters in the MCU and share the profit with them that these movies make, they'd make more money than they would trying to do it on their own. Just ask them how they feel about what Madam Web has earned at the box office. Because with this report from Daniel RPK about the multiverse wanting to stick around because of Sony, it's clear that they want some characters to cross over. That's the only reason Sony would get Marvel Studios to keep the multiverse open so they could have characters jump back and forth. But here's the deal. Sony's not going to get MCU characters to jump over to the Spider Universe that aren't Spider-Man related. There's no way they're going to get a new Iron Man or Captain America or the Scarlet Witch even to jump over into the Spider-Verse over at Sony. That's not going to happen. But can they have some of the characters that they own jump over to the MCU? Yes, absolutely. If Marvel Studios says it's okay, which why wouldn't they say yes to characters like Spider-Gwen, Kraven the Hunter, a real Madam Web done correctly, introducing a true Spider-Verse done the proper way, introducing true live-action variants of Spider-Man like they did in No Way Home, but on an even bigger scale. It makes a lot of sense. In a way, it's almost essentially what Marvel Studios would do if they owned all of the rights to all of these Spider-Man characters. And again, this would be kind of the only reason why Sony would want Marvel Studios to continue on with the multiverse, so the characters can cross over. Let's just hope that they're actually being smart about it and are realizing that, hey, our characters can be a lot more successful if they're in the MCU. Even if they kind of jump back and forth, if we have them in the MCU, they're going to make a lot more money and be a lot more successful. And overall, Sony would make a lot more money as well. And what's really interesting is this actually is a good point for Sony to reevaluate everything after the flop that was Madam Web. Perhaps this really was the exact thing they needed for Sony to take a step back and reevaluate their plans. And according to this Hollywood Reporter article, that's exactly what they're doing. They planned a pretty big franchise off of Madam Web, and they're no longer doing that. And they must know that it's not the lack of interest in Spider-Man characters that is keeping people from going to see these movies. It's the fact that they are producing bad movies. And I mean that quite literally. I think Sony is responsible for producing these bad movies. I don't think it was the cast. And I do think Sony interfered a lot with the direction of the film, with the writing of the film, with the acting of the film. I really think it came down to Sony making bad decisions. But it seems like Sony is going to have some characters cross over into the MCU, which is the only reason we would get this report. Sony would want the multiverse to stay open so their universes could interact. And this really would be Sony's way of kind of saying, hey, we're not giving you all the characters back. We're still gonna kind of have them in our own universe, but we'll have them cross over so you can use them in the MCU and they can be a massive success and make a lot of money. This way, Sony makes a lot of money and they retain the rights to the characters. Now, in a perfect world, Marvel Studios would get the rights back to all of them. They would buy them from Sony, but we know that's not gonna happen. So this just might be kind of a best case scenario for us. Marvel Studios will get to use some Spider-Man characters in the MCU. Even if they have to kind of share them with Sony, they'll get to use them and they'll get to interact with Avengers and X-Men and the Fantastic Four. And that's kind of the dream for us fans. But we'll have to see. Of course, nothing is set in stone and we don't have the intricate details yet, but hopefully this is the direction that it is going. If this would happen, would you be super stoked for it or not? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on the MCU and the Sony Spider-Man verse. And if you leave a comment and subscribe, you're automatically entered in our giveaway for a chance to win a PS5, an Xbox Series X, or some Marvel Legends items. The winner picks one item and we pick one winner at the end of every month. Like I said, only one day left in February. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.